So good morning and welcome to this A2I talk. I hope that you're all well out there. Today we have an exciting talk in front of us by Andrew Julius Bende, who is the Senior Associate for Global Markets at the BioInnovation Institute Foundation. The BioInnovation Institute is a Novo-funded setup, and their Global Markets Initiative, which we will talk about today, was launched in early 2023. The BioInnovation Institute is essentially a medtech incubator that works with a large portfolio of Danish startups and early stage companies. And Andrew's job on behalf of these companies is to explore the opportunities on emerging markets. But Andrew, I'm sure you will talk much more about that. And thank you very much for joining us here today. So we will start today's session with a 20-minute to 25-minute presentation from Andrew, followed by 10 to 15 minutes where you can ask questions. For the questions, please raise your digital hand or post your questions in the chat. There's let me just get this here. Okay, thank you. I should also say we are recording this session, which you can see on our website. That is it for my side. Andrew, please go ahead.
Yes. Cool. Thank you so much for the introduction, Thomas. And as I share this, I've made well, not short, but a PowerPoint. Let me see how short that will be, how long. And that's basically intended to give a picture. And Thomas, you used the word exciting. I don't know how exciting that will be with this, what I'm going to talk about, because, and you know, unlike a company, a direct company with a product and things like that, that will come and talk about their journey, I will take it from more, what should I say, framework kind of approach, and how that connects us to what we are trying to do. And you're right, it's very new. We started last year in the beginning, and so we are still putting blocks around. But let me try to talk a little bit into what we are doing and just frame what we are doing today. My main question here may be that could be relevant is if Denmark and for that sake Europe in general engages more in emerging markets, and we have seen this coming up, we have seen the Africa strategy, we have seen more and more drift that way. Then what could be interesting? What could be our role? And what frameworks, mandates can back our work, and how could this look like? And that's where I'll go a little bit into some of the examples that BII is working on. And yes, I sit at BII as Senior Associate for the global markets. And just to also give you a geographical scope, what we are doing right now, even though we cover a big number of, our mandate is across all the LMICs, which is about 47 countries. For now, we are targeting and focusing on India and 4 countries from East Africa, and that's Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda. To kind of have a starting point before we enlarge this work, if we get there. Yes, a quick introduction to the BioInnovation Institute, or BII, as we abbreviate it. Our mission is to bring ideas to life, and of course research to market. And this basically emerges from the Novo Nordisk Foundation, who gives us all our financing. Having a lot of research and a lot of that staying on shelves, And so back in 2015, a project was started to go out to universities and help researchers, principal investigators to try and translate this, bring this to market. But when people are in universities, normally research and teaching and publications, go ahead of the entrepreneurship. And then in 2018, the BioInnovation Institute was commissioned as a private foundation. So normally we don't say daughter company. We are funded by Novo Nordisk, but we are a private foundation. And we have a non-profit objective. Across each year, we give about 35 Danish projects, close to 30 million euros, and our job is to incubate and create companies with the aim of bringing this to market. And we have this objective of that these companies, and especially the science we select and incubate, has to have benefits for people and society, and that we can go a little bit in a dialogue discussion on that. But it's extremely early stage, and that's because there was a gap in that at that level. Let me again give you and what basically these companies that we select at BII get is, of course, knowledge, network, infrastructure, and funding, and we select companies within these two main tracks. We have a planetary health track, and then we have a human health track. And these are some of the categories within the two tracks. In the planetary, you have food tech, carbon capture, ag tech, biomaterials. And on the other side, you have, among others, cancer, immune inflammatory diseases, metabolic, women's health, infectious disease, brain and mind. And really, to give a very high level, again, we have these 4 different programs. One of the programs, BioStudio, that's a grant where someone gets 1 million per year across 3 years. Then we have Venture Lab and Venture House. We send out a call twice a year where we select 5 to 7 projects in each. In the Venture Lab, normally it's so in the BioStudio is to help research, novel research, selected research to come in, to develop but become a startup at some point. In the Venture Lab, we are looking at early stage startups developing further. So again, growing their science further, but starting to create a team and acting like a company. In the Venture House, it's normally what we call a maturation. So, and these two, Venture Lab and Venture House, are convertible loans. And this Venture House is for these companies kind of mature and attract further financing. And here we see several other finances coming in. And then last year, again, in the beginning of this year, maybe, we started the Deep Tech Lab. With under the Diana program, NATO Diana program, that's focused on quantum computing. Now, the way we select these companies, and this is important for me to say, even though I'm talking about the global markets, is we kind of have a rigorous due diligence process. And I'll come back a little bit later why I'm talking about this. And that brings in very many different stakeholders that are looking at each of the companies. The science we are selecting, it needs to be able to be scanned for market potential. The industries need to tell us if this actually is something that will work, innovative, that's actually beneficial for the current setup. IP issues need to be clarified, and of course, knowledge networks kind of come in and certify that, okay, this is actually very interesting. And then the process goes from 1 to 4, as you see. And part of what the companies get at BII is also this investment and pitching to investors possibilities. So when the companies come in all the cohorts, we have a VC list, investor list of, I think currently 100, but let's keep it at 80 plus. And each of these companies already from the start get the chance to pitch and kind of improve their pitching along the way, but also set their value proposition to the market. And again, this is another process which either tells these companies if they will make it, they'll get a lot of feedback, or they will not make it. And we have seen that actually the combination of the modalities I've just spoken about have created impact, if we can say it in that way. The numbers here can show you what we have created since BII was started in 2018. We have accelerated at least 112 startups. We have given them 105 million in funding of convertible loans. They have raised, on the other hand, 626 million euros from elsewhere. And that's that 6 times factor is actually a very interesting statistic for us, that if they had not probably been given the financing that we have given them and created the ecosystem that we have created, then maybe they wouldn't be on the radar of some of the other financiers. And I think having this VC list and making sure that the startups are meeting different financiers, investors, and VCs, then also increases the chances of these startups actually getting more financing. And then another statistic is 56% number of first-time founders. And I think this tells a little bit about what role an ecosystem builder, as we like to call ourselves, can play in an ecosystem. But all this I've talked about, and the mandate of BII is acceleration and ecosystem development in Denmark. And of course, we have several projects from across Europe, but there's the thought and the mandate that they should be able to have a CVR in Denmark and have some form of presence at least once in a while at the BioInnovation Institute. And that's because we want to build an ecosystem, a life sciences ecosystem in Copenhagen, a competitive one. And so, with these numbers, again, the discussion came up between the BioInnovation Institute, the Novo Nordisk Foundation, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation at that time. And the question was, all right, you have all this success, and what's your relevance globally? What if you went to Kenya or Ghana or India? What would the relevance of BII and, of course, the Novo Nordisk Foundation financing it that way be? And that's kind of the background for creating the global markets. And so here I've used the term turning the focus on the low and middle income countries, or LMICs, as we call them. And we started, yes, in 2023. And that's a combined tripartite financing between Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Novo Nordisk Foundation, and the BioInnovation Institute. And our job is to try and accelerate companies to LMICs. And we have a big ambition. And I know many of you that have worked in these countries will almost laugh at us because we want to create sustainable businesses. And we also want to create this wide-scale societal impact. And I mean, of course, the questions we get is, Andrew, but companies that are established and have their own finances and have traction and market other places are struggling in low and middle income countries, emerging markets, however big they are. What do you think? How do you think a startup will succeed? And we have really given this some thought, and And of course, we run into there is no financing for taking these startups. They are not mature enough, so they don't have the setup to actually survive in these markets. We can't see how a startup that's already small and struggling in Copenhagen can go and engage in a market that's not as organized as Denmark is, or many of the European setups are. And so we have used some time on asking ourselves, of course, what could be some of the preconditions we put in place to help our startups. Yes, we want to create go-to-market strategies for these startups, but maybe they are not yet there. Some of the startups have no product yet. And so if that's not going to happen, or if that's happening in 3, 5, 10 years from now, then what could be interesting to start working on now? And so that brings us to talking about, could we actually start creating some regional platforms, a localized form of support and partnerships for our startups to come in? And we have a big advantage here at BII that the startups are only starting to develop their products themselves. And so we see that when we start pairing, partnering, matching our startups with others in these countries that are working on exactly what our startups are doing, we start hearing conversations of, maybe we could collaborate on some form of science. And of course, internally in BII, we are trying to push for more localized forms. We don't want to export products or companies for the sake. We, again, maintaining the impact aspect, we want to look at, could we actually create joint ventures between teams here at BII in Denmark, in the Nordics, and teams elsewhere? Or can our companies create other companies, but with that factor that there is some form of infrastructure development in the local ecosystems we are going, or creation of jobs, high skills development, and things like that. And of course, it's many people have done this, but there is no end to learning. We are looking at developing knowledge frameworks and how to engage in these markets. We also use some words like business success or societal impact. What's this? What are we looking at? How are we measuring this? And of course, the biggest challenge is always the financing. And again, trying to work on some financing modalities, because we know that we are too early for others to want to go with us in emerging markets. It's too risky. So how do we de-risk our startups and companies so other people can get attracted to actually going this journey with us? We have, of course, in this, you know this, we have looked at many different frameworks, and I'm bringing in this because unlike a company going alone, our startups will not be able to do that. And so BII and partners are looking at how can we best position ourselves within some form of intergovernmental supportive frameworks that can actually, support the work we are doing. So it's not on each company for itself, but some form of wave that both supports the Danish interests, but also looks at the possibility to support local ecosystems. And I think we have a couple of those frameworks. Some of these, but I think that, and maybe back to our short discussion earlier in the beginning, we see our role, I think, best fitting this African Union, European Union innovation agenda, and I don't know how many of you have looked at, where we see that we can position ourselves within this theme of strengthening research and innovation, between the collaboration, within the collaboration between the African Union and European Union. And there's already frameworks for that. There is about 7 frameworks you can use within the African Union, but one of those that's very interesting for us is this Global Gateway. And again, it showed up when the Danish strategy for Africa came around. And we already see that when we start positioning our work and taking the companies, as I'll try to show you in other slides, some of the countries, that these 4 objectives then become interesting for both, of course, us as BII and the work we do within research and innovation and bringing to market, but also for the countries that we are going to, for government agency, for other for private actors that are looking at how do we not just receive Danish companies, but receive these companies at a footing where we see advantages for both sides. And I think this framework gives us a semblance of that. And I will quote when Dr. Peter Weiss, now Professor Peter Weiss at Public Health Institute in Makerere, he actually mentioned, said to me, Andrew, we're actually not looking for equality in financing or infrastructure or innovation. We are just looking for some form of fairness in collaboration in how we start working together and building things together across the European Union and the African Union. And this is basically for African Union, of course. And in India, we are working with several intergovernmental agencies that are also looking at how can, Danish companies that have a product that feeds this 70% target of government, the word is going out of my, where the government actually procures from the company and then puts it into the public service. How do you bring that into India? But this, for us, is a very interesting framework. And based on those frameworks and some of the things we've done, I'll just walk through. I don't know how easy for you to see this. It should have been 5 different slides, but let me try to summarize it on this. So you see the connectivity. In the middle, you have our number 5. That's something we are aiming at. We are trying to develop knowledge as we go on. But one of the things, number 1, that we really are targeting now is how do you start creating collaboration on core innovation at that level, and how do you start in a manageable way funding that? So the companies we have at BII, people coming in with an idea on, let's say, a Sandu that's working on aquatic pests and parasites, or agrobiomics that are working at naturally occurring microbes, can collaborate with a cohort, a team, a company in Nairobi or in Ghana, Accra, to co-create something together. And so we have started looking at the possibility of a small-scale grant. We have piloted 2, one to Sandu, one to agrobiomics, where we give them a grant to go out and do field trials with their partners in these countries. And the results that we have gotten from Sandu are impressive. They have actually found out that while they were targeting ick, which was one set of celiac virus in aquatic in aquaculture, they found out that their product actually works on trichodina, and trichodina is one of the most stubborn infections in aquaculture, and especially in hatcheries in the Great Lakes region. So for us, that was a mind-blowing experience, because all of a sudden the people in Nafiri, in Kajansi, in Kampala, they were saying, but this is actually very interesting. Let's take this to the next level. Let's do another trial in specifically hatcheries, and the possibility of making this as a standard way of, for example, treating maintaining water quality in hatcheries, but also pre-treating water in ponds before you introduce the seed, the fish seed into ponds. The other aspect we are looking at, number 2, is country delegations. I know Access to Innovation does this, and that was interesting for us because, you know, and Thomas, you will probably bear witness here that it's very rare for startups of our nature to join in these delegations because they don't have a product. They are trying to go to build for the Danish market. They are trying to look at the US. So there is no attraction at all in Nairobi or Kampala. But when we bring people down there and they see what could be, we see brains working. We see them returning to there and starting to think, but maybe we could. And I'll give you an example of a pharmaceutical company. This is maybe 15 years from now when they have a product. It's called Loma Therapeutics. They are working on an HPV vaccine. And they realized that the biggest HPV prevalence is actually in the global south. And so they are already on their way to Kenya again to start collaborations with scientists on how they can actually include a track for cervical HPV in their production development story. The other thing we are working on is this co-creating of capacitating programs. And we are piloting here between the 1st and the 10th of October a program in collaboration with the Novo Nordisk Foundation and Delta Forte, a local incubator in Nairobi, where we have made a call for innovations within energy, agtech, food processing and energy spheres to gather up for 10 days, bring some BII startups together and do a kind of, I wouldn't call it an incubation, but maybe it's, let's say, an education for 10 days where it's not just skills development, but also a collaboration and discussions, dialogue on what really an ecosystem in Denmark looks like and what an ecosystem in Nairobi looks like. We have 5 companies from Kampala, from Uganda too, and 3 from Tanzania, and I think 2 from Rwanda that will join in. And this starts to help kind of forming ways of how do we actually start collaborating across ecosystems and build capacities. And then we are also intentionally starting to actively engage in the global ecosystem activities and especially on the life sciences space. Many of you know the AFSIC. This takes place every year in the UK. It's a conference specifically focused at investing in Africa. And with our ambition of trying to help our companies to form local kind of either joint ventures or daughter companies, we think that this is a good space to be and start engaging. And again, part of the African Union, European Union gives us that mandate to start engaging with different impact investors or mainstream VCs that want to collaborate. The other thing we are looking at is, of course, the Global Impact Investment Network. We have a lot of links and contacts that are looking at our pipeline, as you saw. And again, that's why I kind of went a little bit into the rigorous due diligence. And we have gotten a lot of feedback on, look, I think what BII does for us as investors is that you have proven that the science works. And you have gotten some of the top range industrial players saying this actually has a chance. So our main role then as investors is to make sure that the market works or the product goes to market. And so we see the possibility of positioning ourselves in that direction. And we will run here on the 23rd and 24th of October, we will run a side event at the Global Bioeconomy Summit in Nairobi. Where collaborating with 5 other partners. We are 4 other partners, 2 from Nairobi, 1 from Rwanda, and another one from Tanzania. And the idea again is to continue the conversation of how do we actually operationalize this. And you hear my kind of most of our products on how do we develop together. And that's very intentional for us because, as I said in the beginning, our companies are early stage. Many of our companies are testing their product on the market for the first time. Many of our companies are developing their product in the incubation acceleration process at BII. And so we see a very clear window of kind of collaborating and co-creation with the local ecosystems that we are targeting, and therefore putting a lot of products around that here in the start. And of course, we will, as time goes on, we will want to catch up with some of you seasoned investors and people that have taken more mature companies to these countries to see how then you can join in on supporting some of the things we are doing to seriously go into market. But the possibility also of you knowing companies that are early stage or ideas that are early stage that could be relevant for both, of course, having a chance on being sustainable on the markets, business sustainable, but also this wide scale impact and fall within the life sciences angle that BII looks at. So this is BII, and we of course we have within BII, out of the 112, we have maybe a quarter of those companies that can probably go to these countries, and I think that's one of the other limitations on what we are doing, but we at the same time see it as a strength. We have several companies that could actually fit these markets. Again, demystifying the fear that something built in Copenhagen does not necessarily. Yes, there is a lot of challenges on that way, but could there be a route to actually help the co-creation, collaboration on making that work? And then yesterday we had a CEO session with Margrethe Vestager, and I think some of the comments she made were very, very interesting. That we have for many years focused on the negatives of emerging markets and very little on the positives. And of course, the politics may never change. It may never change. We see countries that are almost pulling out and then falling back in. But we have also countries that are stable enough and where our companies can actually probably do both, do have an impact, but also benefit from the growing markets in these countries. So that's it, Thomas. The other slides I will not show because it's very detailed about the companies. This is just a very quick example. Sundew is now in the market. They are looking for further investment. But I think what I want to show with these slides is the strength of the science, but also the current financing that they have gotten. So and this is also one of the things we when people ask us about why wouldn't you invest in a company in Nairobi instead of you taking a company from Denmark? And I give them an example of Sundew. Before we took Sundew to do a field trial in Uganda, we are planning a second one. There was no 500,000 Danish kroner going to Uganda, paying for 3 scientists and setting up some form of equipment to do exactly this field trial in Kajans in Nafiri. And through that collaboration, which wasn't a market development, it was a science verification validation, we see the possibility of, already the transfer of knowledge and a support to thinking through the infrastructure. Here in Copenhagen, we would do this field trial like this. How could we make sure that Kajansi tries to do exactly the same? Or if it's too expensive, what are the alternatives that works in that context? We see that exchange happening. The other thing is that should Sandu, let's dream a bit. What if Sandu goes in and starts a daughter company or a joint venture? We know that Sandu is backed by financing. So we believe that if Sandu takes that decision, and they are quite enticed now, it will take, of course, a lot of work to set up. But if they take that decision, then we see the possibility of them coming with financing to these markets. And if done carefully in joint venturing, connecting teams on both sides, then we also see another avenue of financing flowing to the south through a startup like this, and probably supporting the building of infrastructure and capacities. Whether it will succeed, that we will see as time goes on. But we see a lot of possibilities in what we are doing. I'll stop here. I have more companies, but I'll not bore you with the good story from BII. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I think this is a good point to stop. So we have a few minutes left for questions. And thank you for the very interesting presentations. You are surely ambitious at the BioInnovation Institute, but you also have the money to be ambitious. So that is very encouraging. And I would say also here at Access to Innovation, we know from both good and bad how hard the journey is from taking science, converting it into something that resembles a product, and then facilitating the entire journey where you are actually present in a market. So it's a big endeavor. Please, if anyone have questions, this is the opportunity. Raise your digital hand, just interrupt. Yes. Okay. Oh, there's one question from Jakob Braun. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for a great presentation, Andrew. You were talking a bit about your ecosystem, at least coming from the Danish University Hospital here in Denmark. We can see the benefits that the companies will have working with us in terms of getting access to patients, rapidly testing out solutions, etc. Do you have similar in place in the countries mentioned? So the contacts out to the both researchers, but also to the hospitals.
Should I answer as
yes,
questions
please
come?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, certainly, Jakob. Thanks a lot for this question, and I think you're also alluding to a very typical question on if we are going to run clinical trials. Let's go the medical therapeutic way. Then it's rare to find partners that will actually run a clinical trial at the same standard as you would do in Denmark. And as you said, the setup is there. But we have a good discussion and collaboration right now coming up with Noguchi Institute in Ghana, Accra, who are running clinical trials. We have a collaboration, a discussion ongoing with the University of Nairobi, and a series of hospitals where they have also successfully run clinical trials. We are working with the Ifakara Health Institute, one of the oldest in East Africa. They run again clinical trials in Tanzania and across East Africa. And I could go on, the Atal network in India, the C Camp in India again, Bangalore. So again, what we are trying actually, this going in early and being naive and asking, could we actually do this? Then people are saying, yeah, but we have done this for many years. People have just not seen us. or the standards have just not been approved, but come in, let's try, we prove the standards. So we see that happening actually quicker than we thought it would happen. Of course, it's much quicker on the planetary health side. 1 acre fund in Nairobi is running their own field trials. Nafiri, we've just completed field trials. For Sandu, we will go into the next phase. So there's people, and I think our second objective of creating this platform of connectivity, and what we are both calling hand-holding, but also a landing platform. So you know exactly who to go to, and they will tell you from day one, this will be possible or this will not be. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Let me just ask a question, I think, on behalf of our company members. You showed us a slide where you described the process of the different steps that the BII are involved in, from converting and supporting research and converting that into something that is a product, supporting the establishments of companies, the incubation part, but also the acceleration where you support and build bridge to private investors. So if I'm a company who've not been part of step 1 or 2, is it possible to kind of enter the BII at a stage where you're maybe an early stage but established company?
Two things. There's a caption. I almost want to say yes because it would sound better. But there's a big caption. One of the things is that because we are building science, and that science is based on our kind of evaluation of what good science is, then we actually want to control what you're building while you have our support. And so one of the captions is that you shouldn't have dilutive financing. So if you're already invested in, and as you use the word established company, then we believe that you're already invested in, and the shareholders and things like that will disturb the whole process. So you'll not fit in, you'll not be accepted. But if you're early stage, you don't have dilutive financing, maybe you have a few grants, but people can't influence what you're doing. It's novel science, it fits within the BI criteria. Yes, you're welcome. In the Bio Studio, we go out to universities and institutional and research institutions and scout. But in the Venture Lab and Venture House, we have a 2-time biannual call for applications. So look out on our LinkedIn and see what calls we have sent out and apply. So, but that caption of you shouldn't have dilutive financing.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. One last question. So when we work with some of our company members, and also when we did that in our earlier PIVE program, one thing that we also tried to encourage was to establish these joint ventures, because we have a feeling that of course increases the success of an easier market entry. Do you have example of joint ventures with the companies from emerging markets and your portfolio? And if you have, are they difficult to establish?
I would imagine they are difficult. What we are doing here is, I think it's very difficult. And I mean, you're talking to a person that came to Denmark as a 30-year-old. So I know that the differences in the way we work and are there. And the infrastructure is also different. I mean, Denmark is well streamlined, if I can say that. Of course, there can always be things that don't work. In many of our countries, it's not as well streamlined, so you run into a lot of challenges. But we are too early to say that we have workable joint ventures at BII, but we have examples of companies But let me be maybe careful here. The examples, most of the examples we have are established companies in Denmark that then set up something elsewhere and or successfully establish a joint venture. But internally in BI, we don't have. We are hoping to show that. But the intention here is also to kind of pave way for, remember, you have BI and you have the companies. So what we're actually trying to do is to pave way for that, taking a very practical example of Sandio that has completed field validation, field trials, goes in to work with the team locally and starts building market, tests that for 1-2 years, and successfully does this. We actually want to pave way for that. A startup in Denmark can do that, and not the typical example of a successful company that then can say, we have this 5 million euros, we are ready to use it or not, to lose it if it doesn't transform into something. So that's actually what we are trying to do in a way. But there are many examples. Thomas, Access to Innovation has a lot of examples for sure.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Time is running up, but I want to thank you very much for joining us here today and talking about all the very exciting initiatives that is coming from your side. So thank you very much.